This is a new role for us. This is the 13th summit. Traditionally, we are in the audience. I've been here as an attendee from an asset owner operator perspective, from a contractor perspective, from a SANS perspective over the last 12 years. And as I looked at my kind of role over those 12 years, there was a lot of that time that I was here learning. There was a lot of that time that I was here going back after I'd be at this summit and implement things at my asset owner, my utility, and we would try to defend from some of the attacks that we learned about, some of the risks that we learned about, and just try to improve our environment. Other years, Mike Asante and the ICS Summit team would bring us back and we would try to lead. We would tell people the good things that we're doing. We encourage all of you, when we have a call for papers for any other summit that's coming, we know a number of you are doing amazing things out in the field that we would love to hear about. As many asset owners and operators that are telling us what works and how they're implementing and the types of things that they're seeing, that really helps guide the summit. Over those 12 years, our conversations have changed. So one of the posters that we had put together had kind of a list on one side of all of the control system types of events. So going back to the 1700s and down into the 1969 when the first Modicon 84 was kind of released. You had all these control system events on the left side of this timeline. And then on the right side, you started to introduce some of the cybersecurity types of events that occurred and the things we used to worry about. So in kind of March of 2000, an insider released a whole bunch of sewage at a facility. The concept of an insider that knows the control system attacking the control system, that was something we used to be fairly concerned about. And then many years flash forward and we saw all this non-targeted malware that was finding its way because of poorly architected networks from a business network down into a control system network. Also, we were generally extremely concerned about that. And in the NERC world, around this time is when we started beginning to develop standards ourselves because we saw this non-targeted malware getting in and impacting operations. We saw a need to do better architecture, have better separation, have better segmentation. We saw Conficker. At this point, as we looked at this and we talked about how concerned we were that Conficker made its way into control networks and process networks, at this point, I imagine there is a tremendous amount of facilities you've been in where Conficker is running rampant. Yes. Still today. Infection of OPC systems, infection of OPC servers. Again, at this point, we've seen a number of pieces of malware that are absolutely targeting specific industrial control system protocols. So the days of old have kind of moved on. We're getting more into a hyper-active world where coming to this conference, hearing about what's happening in the last year, from year to year to year, it's been a tremendous amount of things. As we look to this chart as it grows, starting kind of the 2008 in the bottom of this where you see Conficker, and then everything else being more ICS focused on that chart. It's no longer just non-targeted malware. It's ICS specific activity that we're seeing. ICS opportunistic items at the top, ICS themed components, campaigns, and malware, moving into specific ICS tailored access campaigns, and then down now into the specific ICS tailored effects with Stuxnet, Crash Override, and Trisis, Triton, Hatman. I think those are the three that are most common. Main thing here that we're trying to show is from an ICS customization level to the ICS impact level, everything is moving into that upper right corner, and that should cause great concern for everybody. I think as we saw kind of the Ukraine 2015 attack, and then we saw the Ukraine 2016 attack, we kind of knew that the last mile for us was at some point in time, someday, we would see a safety instrumented system attacked. I don't think any of us thought we would see it in 2017. That we are already at that point where we're talking about targeting and impacting safety instrumented systems and what that means from our networks, from our architectures, from our operations, from our process, and what we need to do about that from an asset owner, operator, and a community perspective.
Yeah, if I can add. So I'm usually one, for anybody that knows me, not to get hyped up about anything and try to keep a level head about these discussions. But if you are in this community and Triton didn't upset you, I think you need to think a little bit harder about what that was. The reason I say that it should actually upset you was because it was the first piece of malware in human history to specifically target human life. There were only two outcomes of targeting safety systems. Either you are trying to kill somebody or you're just okay with it. Either way, you're a jerk. Like, that is the depths of I would say, the depths that the adversary is willing to go to, and honestly, I find it personally offensive, and I hope for many of you that it was an upsetting event on that discussion as well.
Cool. So carrying through these Ukraine 2015 impacts of 225,000 customers, first of its kind, civilian-owned, operated critical infrastructure, that should be upsetting to everybody. This wasn't a military target. These were people's homes, residences, businesses that were impacted, definitely as a means to showcase a capability. That first of its kind, in this case, not really a malware component that caused the effect. It was more of a using the tools and technology against the organizations that were impacted. Moving into 2016, where now we see a 200 megawatt impact at a transmission level substation taken out. Now we see first of its kind, modular ICS malware with a framework built. And again, if that didn't concern you, it absolutely should have. The ability to have a framework and have a structure and thinking along those lines where now you can load in whatever ICS payload that you might need, kind of a Swiss Army knife for the job you're gonna go, your toolbox that you're gonna walk into a target with, what protocols do you need to bring in, what exploits do you need based on the specific industrial control system targets that are located there. So the point Rob just made, the safety instrumented system that was impacted in the Middle East, this is something that we are now, if we modeled out all the bad things that could happen in an industrial control system environment, we're already at the end of our list. We had a long list of somebody could cause a loss of view, a loss of control, a misuse of systems, a misoperation of systems, a denial of view, denial of control. All the way down at the bottom of the list is the worst thing that could happen is somebody could manipulate the safety system. Well, we're here. We're running out of room of, well, what could be worse than this? And as we kind of look at this stage going on, the next thing that we see is really where possibly TriSys was already going, which was a combination attack of impacting the safety system in a way that you have modified the logic, and then there is a twin to this. There's a TriSys twin that is running within the DCS environment. So now you've reconfigured the safety system to run in a certain way, and then you misuse and misoperate the process control or the process system at the same time, leading to equipment damage, human loss to life, and something significant. We're heading towards that path of a combination attack that is at that level of the environment, at that level of the network.
And if I can note, many of you have incident response plans. We're seeing the community really build around this and do a lot better than having an IR plan. I'd make sure and go look to make sure that it's actually control system focused as well, but the community is definitely growing there. But what most people don't have today, and visiting sites I can say most people don't have, is combination events. The idea that you might not have root cause analysis of what exactly is going wrong, but your normal disaster recovery plans are kicking in. But what if you have 2 or 3 different events going on? So we've talked a lot about, well, what if you had a crash override-like capability in place that was set up to act 24 hours from now, and then you do a Ukraine 2015 style attack first. So everyone's responding to one attack, and there's already another attack that's queued up, ready to go. Like, you need to be thinking about the adversary in the terms that they are human threats. The malware is not your threat, the vulnerability is not your threat, the human on the other side of the keyboard is your threat. And if you can start to think about how they might be dynamic, you need to make sure that your response plans and your ability to recover is also dynamic for those scenarios, because it is the next natural progression of what we're seeing.
This is an area where, as we talk about the learn, defend, and lead, if any of these pieces of information are new to you, this is an opportunity for you to learn about them throughout this next 2 days. We're going to have a number of people talking on these topics. Learn from them. Think about how you would defend them in your environment. So you're going to think about it from the perspective that you have from an ICS perspective. How would I defend this type of an attack? How would I defend a Ukraine 2015 attack? How would I defend the 2016 attack? How would I defend the safety instrumented system TriSys attack? You'll think about that from your perspective, but you also need to move into the lead perspective and go back and talk to your operators and say, hey, if the Ukraine 2015 attack happened here, what would you do? What are your general orders? What are your operating orders? What are your emergency procedures? What do you do when your system is being misused against you? So you need to lead other people within your organization after you've taken your own defensive actions. The 2016 attack, same kind of thing. Talking to field crews, microwave crews, communications crews, people that are out in the field tech service to make sure that many of them may very well know the protection schemes, relays, RTU operation, but they may not know cyber threat very well. They may not understand as they've moved their systems to digital assets that now they have an entirely new attack vector that is cyber. Moving to the safety instrumented system, looking at your architectures, but also talking to your safety teams. You consider all the safety briefs you go through, the personal protection equipment, all the things you have to wear, clothing. Most of your companies have strong, strong safety cultures. There should be a time where your safety team is coming to you and saying, hey, we want you to handle the safety brief from a cyber perspective, where you're going to come in and talk about the safety risks to your company through a cyber attack and what that would look like, how it could impact your organization. Cyber should absolutely be part of your safety programs at your organizations. As you look at these combination attacks, that is something that as a community, we need to understand that better. Work with the vendors, work with integrators, work with asset owners and operators and how they're architecting, making it harder from an adversary to jump from one side of your network architecture to another, and then ultimately getting down into the crown jewels in your safety instrumented system levels. This is a piece where everyone in this room has an objective and kind of an ask that we have of you is to go back and lead. So throughout these next 2 days, you're going to hear from asset owners and operators and what they're doing, what works, how they're defending their systems. You're going to hear from vendors. There's an entire vendor area with lots of products, lots of tools that'll help you. You'll have equipment manufacturers that you'll hear them talking about their products, what they're doing from a development perspective. Integrators, people that will come and help you integrate these systems and operate them and manage and maintain them. We have speakers from government, ICS CERT, which is now the HERT team, correct?
Yeah, there is no more ICS CERT, but they still do work in the community, especially from the DHS HERT team. Yeah, HIRT. HERT.
Hunt and Incident Response Team. We have educators here as well. We have students here. So for those of you that are looking to hire, for those of you that are looking for new teams, this is a whole bunch of people that are moving into this space and ready to do great things. As we can't have Bob on stage without little Bobby next to him. So the items here, as you look to these, the defending, the learning, and the leading side, as we've grown as a summit over the last 13 years, we've kind of matured as an industry. Adversaries have matured along with us. I would ask that eventually little Bobby grows up into a teen and we have a adolescent Bobby comic book series.
I don't want to deal with a teenager. Yeah.
young adult Bobby. But I think there are things that even the community in total needs to grow from and learn from.
Yeah, so I don't do slides, really, so there's no slides from me. I'm just going to wax poetically to you and pontificate about security. But here's what I think the central core message is, and something that I want to reinforce for you starting into this 2 days of summits. You know, tomorrow I'll stand up and talk and be more prescriptive and tell you, like, here's 2 things I think you should all do this next year. Like, I'll get to that in my talk, but here's what I want you to take into the summit. And that is very simply that there's a lot going on in the community, but we can also be doing a lot more. I am often seen as a person that is downplaying a lot of the ridiculous hype because it needs to be downplayed. How many of you saw the New York Times article about the power grid attacks from Russia? Yeah. How many of you honestly thought that accessing one HMI was going to take down the power grid? Anybody? Good. All right, we're all on the same page. Good. All right, every aspect of that article was ridiculous. However, there are active threats from foreign nation states targeting the grid in a very aggressive way. So I often find that the gap that we need to address is on one side, there's the camp of, oh my God, we're all going to die. And then there's this other camp of Ukraine's on the other side of the internet. Somewhere in the middle, we got to exist. And this is my challenge to you all for this conference, is to exist in that middle. The threats are becoming far more aggressive and more sort of sophisticated in their operations than we've ever seen before. There is a sharp uptick in activity targeting our sectors. And it's not the onesies and twosies. It's also a lot more than people realize, actually going back to Little Bobby comic, because a lot of people aren't even looking. I will have utilities, smaller infrastructure sites, manufacturing plants that will tell me we've never had a cyber attack. We do not have threats. We're not being targeted. Cool. Are you collecting from the industrial networks to be able to do analysis? What? No. Well, then how would you know? If you're not looking into your environment, you can't accurately tell me that you don't have threats active in them today. It's like Schrodinger's ICS or something. So be sure to understand that the threats are not some other side of the world issue. These are our common threats, but also understand the community is doing a lot of good work. And we don't get the news article that the power stayed on today. We don't get the news article that the manufacturing site actually has been running through crisis-like scenarios outside of regulation just because they know it's the right thing to do. Like, we don't get told those things, but they're happening. There are a number of asset owners around the community and operators around the community that are doing all this. I mean, imagine many of you here today have been running through these scenarios. Actually, let's just do this. How many of you in the asset owner operator community and defense community have already run through these type of tabletop exercises anywhere at any level in your operations? Quite a few of you. That's awesome. That's what doesn't get reported out. That's where the hype doesn't actually see all the good work that goes in the community. But I want to reinforce with you, we have a lot more to do. There are still basics that aren't being done, and a lot of the basics and things to do with like regulation deal with the very minimum standard. We will never regulate out the human adversary. We will never address the human adversary with a control that puts in place. You do that with human defenders that are well-trained and empowered in your organizations to go against the human adversary. That's what we're here this week for. For those of you that are sticking around for training, that's what we expect, because this is still a small community with a lot of things being defined, and you can be that leader in your community. I often don't concern myself with the entirety of the power grid going down. There's more than one grid, but I don't often concern myself with that scenario. I concern myself with local communities and the impact. You know, what happens if San Antonio loses power for 5 hours? Just even mentally, how does that deal with the local populace? What if you're, so the whole NotPetya thing, you know, that should have illuminated how interconnected we are as a society, where Maersk and Merrick on 2 different attacks can get hit, and it changes global trade and vaccines showing up in Ukraine. You know, we are an interconnected community. So with all hype aside, I will say we have problems, our threats are getting worse, but we can still do this. Like, we are a community that can fix this, and if there's any community that can, it's ours. I'm not in banking security for a lot of reasons, but one of which is, well, good luck, guys. Have fun with that. That sounds complicated. ICS, we can do this. I hate when people say, oh, well, ICS is 10 years behind IT. How many of you have ever heard that one? Oh, we're a decade behind. Yeah, that's nice. Tell me about OPM and Equifax. Good for you, IT. I'm glad you've been so far ahead. We can do this. This is a community that we put our mindsets to it in defensible environments. We can actually fix it. It's not just the idea that we can be a little bit better. We can fix it. But I want you to take away from this as well one simple thing. The idea that you cannot be targeted by doing something is ridiculous. So I want to reinforce that. And I want you to carry this with you throughout these talks. I often go around to different asset owners and operators, and I hear sometimes, yeah, but we're not a good target. You get to decide everything, literally everything, about what the adversary has to do in your environment. What you're producing, your staffing, your training, your architecture, the defenses in place. Everything you do dictates everything the adversary has to do. That old adage that you have to defend everything and the attacker only has to get one thing right is just plain stupid. It's not true. You have so much power as a defender. The one thing you get no say over is if you are a good target. Only the adversary decides that. So move away from that mentality this next year. What I'm always concerned about with events like this is we get together for 2 days, we get hyped up, we're ready to go, we're excited, and then it just sort of trails off after the conference and we don't make changes. That's not this community, so don't be part of that. Make sure that you take lessons learned from here. Pick 2 talks that resonate with you. 2 things. Grab them, go implement them. Measure yourself against that. Figure out, you're going to go home from the conference. For the next 30 days, you're going to forget everything about the conference, and then sometime after that, come back to an area where you're going back and pulling up the materials and pick 2 things. Don't do 20 security controls. Don't do all the Newark SIP standards. Don't do everything. Pick 2. 2 things. Go do it, and then come back and tell us about it next year. I want your stories. I want your lessons learned. I want to see you sharing with the community. That's how we grow this. That's how we do better. That's what I'm excited about. I will say also, as we start wrapping up our time here, that this is an area that scares everybody. So I want you to be that change agent in the community that doesn't scare everybody. We don't need to do this through fear. The attention about cyber threats for infrastructure is gotten and maintained. Like, an email gets sent to a corporate email account of a nuclear power plant, and it is a New York Times article that we're all going to die. Like, attention is gotten. People understand that there are risks. But be that person that level sets and says, you know what, hey, that wasn't as scary as it sounds, but there are some issues that concern us. Here's what we need to work towards. And I will just say again, when we start looking at what the threats are actually doing, the harder we look, we find way more. I often think that a lot of the fact that we're not seeing threats in the community today really ties back to we're not really looking. And as we start seeing a budding security community, as we start seeing a lot more active defense and getting in those environments and hunting, we're seeing a lot more stuff. So be prepared for what you find. Start thinking through the fact that there are these existing threats, and you will find at the end of it that we can make change. That's what's exciting to me. That's why I always like coming to SANS. I mean, my son was born 12 days ago, and I'm still here. My wife is a saint. By the way, yeah. So yeah, for my wife. So I believe in this place enough to come when my wife is going to murder me for coming. I want you to believe enough in this place. I want you to take it with you, because this is honestly where we can make change. And I know I sound like a broken record every year saying that you can do it, but sometimes you get beat up. You go back home and there's culture challenges. Maybe your boss doesn't buy into it. Maybe the employees that you have aren't the rock stars you want to work with. There's always gaps. But in this community, it makes sense to close those gaps, because in this community, it matters. It's black and white. I was joking around with some folks before the conference. If the NSA targets Belgium Telecom, it's a gray issue. Belgium doesn't like it. The NSA is going to say, well, it's counterterrorism, and we're doing our job. And there's going to be shades of gray about arguing on both sides of those. But in targeting civilian infrastructure, it's black and white. If you're doing it, you're a jerk. It's the last bastion of the security community to truly be black and white. That's what you get to exist in, and I just think that's exciting. So I hope you're excited. We're going to have fun talks. We're going to have fun 2 days. We'll have a fun time going out tonight and drinking too much and talking about security. But I would challenge you, don't be cynical. If I start walking around and I hear, yeah, you know, it sucks at work and I can't get the engineers to listen, I'm going to call you on it. I want to see optimism here. I mean, we're in Orlando. We're pretty close to Walt Disney World. How can you be upset? You know, like, this is a really happy place. I don't care how much I have to liquor you up to get you excited, but we'll do it. I expect to see optimism these next 2 days. So with that, Tim, anything else?
As I listen to you, it's always entertaining to hear you. Well, one thing I will say, I heard come out of your mouth, don't do all the NERC SIPs. And just to be clear, if you're an electric utility that is subject to the NERC SIPs, do all of the NERC SIPs.
Do them if you're
just to be clear, sometimes things just spill out.
Yeah, there are manufacturing and oil and gas sites that I go to and petrochemical sites that I go to that do the NERC SIP standards as well. If you're outside the electric community, that might be surprising to you. But it actually has resonated really well across the world. I was doing work in Saudi Arabia recently, and they were going and complying with NERC SIP for a oil refinery. Like, it's out there, which is exciting because people see it as a standard that they want to set a base level. If you're not required to, just make sure you're doing things because you want to move the security needle, not because you want to check a compliance box to your leadership. And there's ways to do both. But yes, thank you for that clarification. I know that Lou is going to come out of his seat and murder me if I say don't do NERC SIP. So yes, indeed.
Right. And one other thing that strikes me as I look at my career, I remember seeing one of our CEOs, and I had many in my career, standing up in front of us as we were moving from an electric industry into deregulation, and we were moving into more digital assets, and we were moving into completely interconnected markets that we used to never ever have before, connections that never existed. And he told us, these are the good old days. Look at today as these are the good old days. Things are become more challenging, more difficult. And you can look at this whole community and say that. We're moving to more digital assets, increase in threats at a rapid rate, increased targeting at a rapid rate. But at the same time, I would say these are the good old days from the perspective of we have so much opportunity ahead of us. This room is filled with people that we have career opportunities, we have challenging goals to go face. Many times when we would try to recruit people into the sector, they would look at the industrial control system world as ancient and 30 years old and not where they wanted to go spend. They wanted to go work in a bank. And then they'd go to a bank and do IT, and they were miserable. So coming into the ICS world, this is a community full of people that are mission focused. They absolutely care about what they do. They care about the product that they make. They care about safety. They care about their colleagues. They like working with solid people. And it's just a great community to be in. So I think you're going to have a great 2 days. I look forward to it. And I turn back to you to close.
And if you're at a bank and somehow here, I apologize for all the crap you're going to take this week. Working at a bank is not bad, okay? I'm just saying we're better. No, but that's exciting. So my last blunt statement to you all, if you don't like the community, I can help you find the door. This is a place you should be because you have a passion for it. There is a 0 unemployment rate in every other security industry. I'll help you find a job and get out of the community if you don't like being here. For the rest of us, it's awesome. We're excited, and I'm happy to work with all of you, and I'm happy to see you again. Good luck with the summit. Tim and I will be around basically doing nothing but joking around and trying to vote on talks. But have fun, good luck, and on to our keynotes.
Thank you.